those of you who want to stay overnight, and I recommend it if you can. There's a number of different options here. Very reasonable to be a part of it. If you're not able to stay overnight, there's an option for that. If you're able to come for part of it, for some of the meals, there are 3 different options. We need to hear from you. If you're going to stay over, we have to give them some numbers this week. There will be subsequent opportunities for you to come. But if you want to stay, be involved with the meals, then we need to hear from you and be able to get that information to them. So this was just an encouragement. We'll be talking about authenticity and confidence and transformation and service. Again, it's not, our retreats aren't geared to, it's good experiences, but we don't want to create a place where you have to come back to Inspiration Hills to get the benefit. We want to create a thing so you learn some things that you can carry with you the week after the retreat and the month after the retreat, some things that will change the way you look at things. It's going to be a great experience, so I want to call your attention to that. You can place these. If there's a chance that you're going to come, I'd say err on the side of putting the information on. There's a mailbox on the way out. We're going to talk about stress as we continue to talk about the series When I'm Stressed. And today we'll talk about the sources of stress. Stress is a part of modern living, and it's unavoidable. To our body, stress is equivalent to change. Anything that causes a change in life at some point and in some way causes stress. There's a couple different kinds. Acute stress is a fight or flight response to threat. When we're threatened in some way, our body changes physiologically. Chemicals are secreted that allow us to be able to take aggressive action either towards the threat or running away from it. Many of our modern circumstances tend to be prolonged. It's not always physical threat that we deal with. Consequently, we can run on the fight or flight reaction longer than it's intended to operate. What's good for our body in a short-term crisis is not good for our body over a prolonged period of time. And that's when we deal with chronic stress, which is long-term exposure to acute stress, that our body readies itself for aggressive action, but the action needed is not so aggressive. But still, we can't dismiss the fact that we feel threatened. We worry about things. And it's that long-term chronic stress that is harmful to our body, actually. The long-term activation of stress, the overexposure to the chemicals, increases the risk of being overweight, not being able to sleep. Digestive problems come from it. Heart disease, depression can be attached to it. Impaired memory, physical illnesses, and other complications. I was reading that stress is known to be a major contributor, either directly or indirectly, to coronary heart disease. Stress is in some way connected with cancer, lung ailments, accidental injuries, cirrhosis of the liver, and suicide. Those are the 6 leading causes of death in the United States. And stress at some level, in some form, directly or indirectly, is attached to those issues. Stressors are the sources of stress. They come in different varieties. There are external sources of stress. Turn your sheet over. There are a list of external stressors. Each of them have a point value that gauges the risk that this event promotes in terms of stress. Death of spouses, divorce, marital separation, you go down. Health problems, pregnancy, gain a new family member, business adjustments, change in financial states, arguments with spouses, and going down. If you care to, you can fill those out. If you have a score of 150 or more, you're a candidate for stress, that you have a number of externally stressful situations in place. We handle stress differently. We don't all handle it the same way. But if your score is, they say, 150 or more, you're a candidate for stress. These are some of the external factors. But the sources of stress are not only external. It's not just things that happen to us, but the way we emotionally respond to the things that happen to us. And the sources of stress then can be internal as well. Stress can be triggered by events that are actual or possible. The reverse side of that sheet represents actual things, and many of you, as you look through, you can check some of those things. Those are things that you're encountering, actual circumstances in your life, but it doesn't take actual circumstances. Even that which is possible is stressful. We wonder sometimes, we put two phrases through our mind. What if? What if? Oh no. What if? Oh no. And this can be a cycle. What if this happens? Oh no. And then what if that happens? And what if this? These are more internal factors. Worrying. And again, just to tell somebody, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about, is not effective. There are things to worry about. Life can be hard. There are stressful things that we're confronted with. And we wonder, what if there'll even be more? What if? Oh no. What if? Oh no. Fears, uncertainties, expectations, internal sources of stress, frustrated expectations. What do you do with stress? We're going to take a look, pretty long look this morning, at a woman, and we see stress at work in Martha. We'll look at a couple things. We'll look at the reasons for her stress, and then we'll talk about her reaction and then Jesus' response. If you have the sheet, take it out with me, and let's look at this story about Martha. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. What are the reasons for Martha's stress? Too many tasks. It says she was distracted by all the preparations. The place that she lived was a couple miles away from Jerusalem. Jesus passed through there, and he stopped by. They were friends of the family. There was Martha and Mary and Lazarus, who was the brother. They lived together. We don't know of parents. We don't know if the parents passed away, but Martha was the oldest, and she was the one who ran the household. And when Jesus came to stay, it was her responsibility to be able to provide the meal. It says that she was distracted by all her preparations. Distracted by all her preparations. I remember when I was in Belize, Central America in 1988 and 1990, did a mission trip there with high school students. And the amount of preparation women needed to put in to do in order to prepare a meal was astounding to me. When you have modern kind of conveniences and some food you already get is already prepared, but what they had to do to put a meal on was amazing. And I imagine that Martha had significant preparations to do in making this meal ready. I'm not sure, though, that the amount of tasks tells the whole story. See, we can be very busy and not necessarily be stressed out. She was very busy, but I'm not sure that just the different things that she was doing, that's the reason for her stress. And there's a couple reasons. It says distracted. The word distracted means pulled in opposite directions. It means to be pulled away or dragged away. And I think what's happening, there are forces that are pulling Martha in different directions. There's part of her that wants to go in that direction, and part of her that wants to go in that direction, and part of the reason why she is distracted is that she feels pulled in half. I think part of her is pulled into the kitchen. That's where, in that culture, women, that's where they did their work. I think another part of her is being pulled into the place where Jesus is having a conversation. And she's being pulled in half into one place and in another place. I think that this contributes to what she's dealing with because There's a verse later on. This is another time later on where Passover was a really big season. And for Jews, then and now, it's like the Christmas season. And you have to get the house ready for a week before the celebration actually occurs. There's a lot of preparations that go into place. You have to make special foods and lots of it. Lots of people come. It's a very busy time. And the text says 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany. He was on his way to Jerusalem, and this is the family he stayed with. It goes on to say, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead, here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. And Martha served. But that's all it says. Martha served, and then it goes on to describe how Mary, her sister, took some perfume and anointed Jesus with it, but we don't hear about Martha being distracted or anxious at all. It seems like she is okay with serving dinner. She probably was good at it, able to get a lot of things done. I think it wasn't just about too many tasks. I think part of the problem, it had to do with not just too many tasks, it had to do with too many voices. Too many voices. There's a couple words that give us this sense. Jesus says you are worried. The word worry literally means having a divided mind. It comes from two words, the mind and divide. And when giving a picture of what's happening in Martha, Jesus looks at her and said, Martha, you know what? You're worried. You have a divided mind. Not just worried. He goes on to say, you're upset. To be upset means to be thrown into disorder. To be upset is the word used to describe what happens when a riot breaks out. If you've ever been to a place where there was conflict and a riot, it starts with somebody shouting this and shouting that, and then pretty soon the voices conflict and there's commotion and people are screaming and shouting and a riot breaks out. And that's the image the word creates, but not what was happening externally, what was happening inside her. It wasn't just about too many tasks. It was about too many voices inside. The clash and commotion of conflicting voices. Again, I think within Martha, we might put it this way. There's a riot going on within Martha. A riot. Different voices calling for different things. She's being thrown into disorder by a divided mind and by competing voices that are pulling her into opposite directions. See, I don't think it's about the external tasks that she is upset, thrown into disorder. I think it's because of the internal voices. And there are several voices that she would be being pulled by. There's the voice of culture, which would say a woman belongs in the kitchen, a traditional woman's role in a patriarchal society, and that's what Jerusalem was. To have authority and to be important, you needed to be a guy. And the women were seen as not as significant as men are in that culture. In fact, the Jewish leaders would pray and thank God that they weren't born Gentiles, slaves, or women. Both of those, all those, can't ascend to the level of importance to God as a Jewish free man can. And that's the culture that they lived in. The voice of culture would say, Martha, your place is in the kitchen. Just stay in the kitchen. And that voice pulls her into the kitchen. But then there's the voice of experience. If Jesus has this meal here, it's logical to believe, logical to assume that this was a family of some means. The house had to be larger. And she was the head of it. Now, what does that tell us? It's a man's world at that time. She must have been a fairly competent woman. A fairly aggressive, can we say? Able to hold the family together, able to keep charge of things. She was an active woman, most likely. The voice of experience said she was managing a successful household in a man's world. And it pulled towards speaking up. Stay in the kitchen. Speak up. Then there's the voice of religion. The voice of religion at the time said women don't belong at the feet of rabbis. In fact, that was frowned upon. It wasn't considered appropriate for a woman to receive a religious education. So you wouldn't find women sitting at the feet of rabbis getting formal religious training. It just didn't happen. So these voices are pulling her into different places. The voice of culture says, get in the kitchen. The voice of experience, wait a minute. I don't need to do what other women do. The voice of religion saying, you certainly don't belong at the feet of a rabbi. Being pulled apart. I think the inward cacophony of voices is the issue. If we ask Martha, what's up? It's Mary. I don't think it was Mary. If we ask, come on, Martha, what's going on? It's the dinner. Gosh, I'm just trying to put all this stuff together. I don't think it was external. I don't think it was Mary, although Mary kind of was somebody who triggered something. And I don't think it was dinner. I think it was the riot that was happening inside. She was being pulled apart in different directions by a divided mind and by conflicting voices. Easier to blame it on dinner. The problem was between the Martha that wanted to stay in the kitchen and the Martha that wanted to sit at Jesus' feet. I think that's the issue. I think there's one more thing. The reasons for her stress is too many tasks. Not really yet, though. Too many voices, I think that's closer. And one missing voice. And I think this is one of the reasons as well. What she says. Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Jesus and asked, Lord, don't you care? Don't you care? What does that communicate? If I come to you and I say, listen, don't you care that, what am I communicating by saying, don't you care? That you're disregarding me. That if you cared about me, you would regard my needs and you wouldn't be acting the way you're acting. So if I say, don't you care? There's a message underlying that is that my needs don't matter to you, that I don't matter to you. The meal, the fact that Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, I think all this goes to prove to her the fact that she doesn't matter to Jesus. And I think that's one of the things she was feeling. If we probe beneath the level of anger and worry, what do you get frustrated about? Externally and internally. Once you probe beneath the level of that stuff, what you find, many of us, I think all of us, at one level, we feel disregarded. When we have what we don't want, and we want what we don't have, we feel disregarded. We find ourselves thinking, whether we verbalize it like Mary, some of us verbalize it, some of us don't. But whether we verbalize it, I'm sorry, Martha, whether we verbalize it or not, what's going on in our head? Well, if I mattered to you, you would have done that for me. You know what I'm like. You know I want this. You know I don't want that. Why didn't you give me this? Why didn't you take this away? Obviously, I don't matter to you. I don't matter to you. And that feeling of being disregarded, that my influence doesn't matter to you, because if my influence did matter to you, you would do what it is. Whose influence was she was looking for? Jesus. I think she was feeling, Jesus, don't I matter to you? I'm doing this and you're not paying attention to me. I think that's one of the things that she was feeling. What are the reasons? Too many tasks? That's not really it. Too many voices. And one missing voice. I think she wanted Jesus to care about her, to regard her, to pay attention to her. Say, is that weak? Oh, come on, that's silly. No, it isn't. It's something that is built in. We want to matter to people, especially people we care about. When we feel disregarded by them, we lash out and say, what's wrong with you? If we probe underneath the level of that anger, you know what we find? Hurt. That's what you find. I feel disregarded. But if I tell you I feel disregarded, that's too vulnerable. That feels too hurtful. So I'm going to get mad at you because I'd rather get mad than I would to say you hurt me. But when we express the anger, now Jesus is real good at seeing what's underneath the anger, and that's what he responds to. Many of us don't respond as well. And when somebody being hurt lashes out, we don't see to the insecurity underneath the hurt, and we react with, and then it becomes this. And you know what ends up happening? As the battle rages at this level, underneath that is a person that wants to be regarded. but can't say that out loud. Some of us, it's not an anger outside. We don't lash out. We withdraw. We pull away. I don't matter to you, therefore I'm going to disappear. What's wrong? Nothing. No, I must have done something wrong. No, you didn't. Well, why did you? I just don't want to talk. You can tell that I have these kind of excuses right at the top of my head. This would be my thing. I'm more of a withdrawer, and I'll back away. Oh, don't worry about me. And others of us are more ones to lash out. But at the base of that, what I want us to see is the same thing. What do we want? What do we want? We want to believe that we matter to people that matter to us. That's what we want. And whether it comes out sideways as withdrawal or comes out sideways as anger, we want to know that we matter to people. And you might not be in touch with this. Some of us are. We want to matter to God. We want to feel like God accepts our influence, that He cares about us. And we demand things from others, and we demand things, and underneath that is sometimes we want to believe that we matter. Martha's reaction, I think it begins with craving. When she was sitting in the kitchen doing that, she's preparing the meal, right? And I think she's probably doing okay for a while. But then she thinks, where's Mary? Maybe she peeks. The homes weren't all divided up. They were more one-level homes, and this might have been a bigger home. It might have been an atrium and a kitchen and some kind of dining room where they reclined at table. They didn't sit in chairs. They kind of lay down on the floor on pillows. And that's where Jesus and the disciples would have been. The table set, Mary is getting the food ready. And it occurs to her, wait a minute, I'd like to be in there, but I need to cook the meal, and that's where it started. I wish I could get some help. Or I wish I could be with him. And the more she thought of it, the more irritated she became. I want them to know how hard I'm working. I don't want to have to fix this dinner. And you know what she maybe did? Well, what do you do? If you kind of don't want to be real overt, maybe she went, side. Or the pot just fell. Bang! Or the bread gets thrown. Boom! Or maybe she had to take a walk outside to get something. Don't worry about me. I'll bring it in. And then she went out and made sure before she went out that she took flour and went woof, woof, so and then looked bedraggled and just don't care about me. Have your nice little conversation, yeah, Jesus, and you can have fun with them. I'll just go outside and get the water. Craving, what she wanted. She wanted them to pay attention, and she didn't. Then craving, what happens? What happens when you want something and you don't get it? And you go to lengths to get it, and you still don't get it. What does craving become? It becomes more intense, doesn't it? Like a mosquito bite that you start to scratch. What happens when you scratch the bite? It gets infected. What's infected envy? Contempt. Contempt. That's infected envy. What ends up happening is the desire to have them pay attention to her becomes the desire to have not them be harmed, but what's wrong with her? What's wrong with him? See, that began with, I want them to pay attention to me. But now that went unregarded, so now rather than just wanting, I'm angry now. And Martha got angry at them. And when she says, Jesus, don't you care? That's a thinly veiled accusation. It's pretty angry. Pretty angry. She was I think she was pretty aggressive as a woman. Other women and other people don't put the contempt outwards. They don't say, what's wrong with you? Some of us, in fact, if there's a problem and somebody comes and says, there's a problem, before we even hear of it, some of us, what did I do? Before we even hear or know of anything, our gut reaction to there's something wrong, I must have done something wrong. Some of us are completely the opposite. There's a problem. What'd you do? What'd you do? So tell me about it. Maybe I can help you solve it. But it's before we hear, we go different directions with this. And our contempt either goes in or out. Some of us become contemptuous of ourselves. Martha, if she reacted this way, would have said, I guess they don't want to spend time with me. This is where I belong. Dismissed, disregarded, withdrawn. Maybe she would have served the food, but then, no, I'm not hungry. I'm gonna stay in the kitchen, and you guys just have a good time. And then she pities herself in the kitchen. Some of us do that. Some of us do the other thing. Contempt. Martha is the direct type, so she says it out loud. And craving becomes contempt, becomes conflict, becomes a fight. The fight can either be internal or external. And I think that's what the riot is about in Martha's heart. I think there's a riot going on, and there's like angry shouts. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with her? And the conflict started in contempt and began in craving, which began in, I want to be regarded. But Jesus' response, she interrupts the proceedings and fires a thinly disguised criticism at Jesus and Mary. She says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? What is she saying? What is she saying to Jesus? Insensitive. Kind of putting it in the framing as a question, but there's a lot to that question. What's Jesus' response? He responds with connection. What he says, Martha, Martha. Let's stop there. Says her name twice to reinforce that he was connecting with her. And I think he looked at her. Lord, don't you care? And he stopped what he was doing, looked at her. Martha, Martha. Established eye contact with her. To coin a phrase, he treated her like one of the boys. Later on, Simon Peter is going to have an issue, and Jesus is going to treat him the same way. Simon, Simon, Satan has obtained permission to sift you like wheat. Calls her by name, regards her, connects with her. Connects with her. Not only does he do that, he clarifies God's voice to her. He doesn't give divine dictates. He doesn't take the heavenly policy manual. Well, you see on page 3 in subsection 8 that it is the duty of a Savior to be able to have women sit at his feet and for women to be serving him. That's what it says right here in the book. He doesn't do that. He doesn't just give divine decrees. He connects with her personally. He doesn't just give her a commandment or a rule. You're worried and upset about so many things. He looks inside and expresses to her, because of his connection with her, what's happening inside of her. He clarifies God's voice. He doesn't say, oh, it's okay for a woman to sit at my feet. He doesn't say it's not okay for a woman to serve meals. He deals with the issue that's at the root of her problem, her own battling internal desires. Jesus regards her. That's what we know. He gives a connection. What it says, this was a little bit after this, when Martha and Mary, the brother Lazarus, died. Here's what we read. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him, he asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. A little bit later on then, in Passover, then Mary took about a pint, Martha's sister, of pure nard, an expensive perfume. That's why we think they must have had some money. They must have been a family of means. And fairly successful then. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Here's the deal with them. They loved him. Stop there. This was God in human skin. They loved him. You know why they loved him? Because they knew that he loved them. They knew that. People who were alongside knew it because it was clear. Don't skip over that. I think there's a lot in Christianity that hangs on that. When Jesus, in the night before he's going to go, he says, remain in me and I will remain in you. And he says, obey me and I will remain in your love. We've said this before. that you can't remain in a place that you don't already. Okay, so what do you say, Mike? Remain in that seat. There's a seat right there. It's down. Remain in that seat. You say, that's stupid. I can't remain in it. I'm not in it. I think the same thing when Jesus says, remain in my love. You know why that has teeth? Because they knew he loved them. This is God. And they knew that he loved them. It was personal. It was by name. We missed that. I remember once, I was in college, and I was looking through John, those verses where it says, if anyone loves me, he will be loved by my Father. And I had to say to him, you know what, God, I really don't know you love me. I hear about it, but it's not personal to me. In fact, nothing about you is personal to me. And I remember this was a going forward in my Christian life when I had to be honest with him. And I had to say, you know what, God, you make me nervous. The only thing that I'm aware of when I hear those things that you're always with me is this bar that exists that I have to try to fulfill. I didn't like God. I guess the good thing was I was able to come to a place of authenticity. And I was able to say it out loud to him. You know what, God, you make me nervous and I don't like you. I know I love you and I want to worship you, but I wish I could feel warmer about you. I wish I could feel warmer. And over the years, that's progressed. And I'm more there now than I used to be, but it began with honesty. Here's the deal, folks. If you had lived at that time and saw God reflected in Jesus Christ, and he looked at you, you would have felt within you, now there's a guy I want to get to know. Why? That guy seems to have something I want. I felt regarded by him. That's what you would have felt from him. It's like he looked inside me. But he didn't look inside me and judge me. I felt connected. I feel drawn to him. I think I want to know him. The picture we paint of Jesus isn't like that oftentimes. Distant. God's distant. He just fires out decrees, thou shalt and shall not. That's not what they saw. They saw somebody who loved them. Jesus doesn't just give her connection, he also gives her correction. He urges Martha to lay aside some of her domestic cares so that she could do the most important thing, the thing that Mary had. See, he didn't just do peace at any price. He didn't say, Mary, you're causing your sister to stumble. Go in there and help her. He let it sit. He let the tension be. And because he had a lesson, he wanted her to know, I do want to connect with you, Martha. Now, we could talk about, well, who would have served the food? And we could argue with that, but what Jesus is telling her is that Mary has chosen something that's okay, and that's a radical position. It's radical because women didn't belong at the feet of rabbis. Not the women of that day. Jewish religious leaders, again, thank God that they weren't born women. Jesus challenged the cultural role of women, especially as it related to being with him and learning from him. He wasn't committed to affirmative action, so he didn't have as many women disciples as men disciples, and I think that's because he was more committed to getting the message out. But as it relates to mattering to him, he was clear that he welcomed, well, that's what the Bible indicates. Look what it says. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people, even on my servants, both men and women. I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. That's happened at Pentecost. When it said, there will be both, and because both matter to God. It says, Paul says, you are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. For all of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. When it says you're all sons of God, it's not talking gender. Sons of God is not male. It's neither male nor female there. And what it means, both are regarded as such. When you come to Christ, you matter to him. He challenged the role. Jews don't matter more than Gentiles. Free don't matter more than slaves. Men don't matter more than women. Stress can make us feel like we don't matter, that our influence doesn't matter. He should know, she should realize. Craving, contempt, and conflict. Once we get into contempt, it's really hard to get out of it. We want to get a pint of blood in order to make ourselves feel better about the other person having something we want. I want the worship team to come up. And you know what I think? It's not really about getting what we want. At the heart of it, you know what we want? We want to be regarded. And we want to know that we matter. And here's what Jesus said. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Some of us are angry, and our stress makes us angry. Some of us, our stress makes us withdraw. Underneath the level of both those things, whether you're angry or withdrawing, I'd like to suggest that underneath both of those things is a desire to be regarded, and a desire to be regarded by God. Jesus modeled somebody who really does care. He really does care. For some of you, the first step would be, Jesus, would you help me to see you accurately? You feel 8 zillion miles away. You tell him that, because he does love. And those who walk with him know that. Now, it takes a while. And for some of you, you know that, you want to know it more. Ask God that he would shine who he is towards you so that you could walk with him as he truly is, because he does love you. To the degree you realize that, you walk with him.
The cry of our heart is to love you more, Lord.
God in a clearer way. I'll tell you what, this retreat's going to be cool. I would encourage you, if some of you are on the line and you're thinking, I would really like to know that, sign up. I'll give you a money-back guarantee. No, actually, I think it'd be. I think that will happen. I found that's the first time I ended up getting connected with God in a deeper way was at a retreat, fall retreat, and I encourage you, fill it out, throw it in the mailbox. You'll be glad you did. They pray for us. God, I do pray that we would get to know you better. We have all these notions about you that make you real distant, and it's kind of hard because we can't see you. But you indicate to us, you came and visited the planet, you told us how you feel, you reflected your nature in Jesus. But life is so busy, so daily, there's so many things that we're stressed by. And we feel like the best thing we need is to get all our questions answered, to get life like we want it, then we'll be at peace. Peace doesn't come from getting our life in order. It comes from connecting with you. That's what you tell us. And I'd ask that would happen. So that even in, as Mary said, contexts where we have what we don't want, but we want what we don't have, yet underneath we know that we're regarded, that you're in us and with us and good's ahead of us. And so in the midst of storms, it helps us to be able to breathe. Pray that you'd help us to walk with you in Jesus' name. Amen. Next week, how not to cope with stress. Mark, that's going to be great.